I ngā mana, i ngā reo, raurangatira mā, ngā mana whenua o Tāmaki Herenga Waka, ngā mana whenua o tēnei whenua Ngāti Whātua o Rākei, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Wow, what a special day that has blessed us all and has particularly blessed me. And I firstly would like to thank Helen for the invitation to be here on this St. Matthew's Day special service. This is my first invitation to a church on such a significant day to be a guest preacher, but I have to acknowledge that earlier in the year, as part of the Pride Festival, I was asked to come and be part of a service. And so for me, I am familiar with this stunningly amazing church. And can I say that all of us here who are held within the body of this church should feel so incredibly blessed as I do at this particular point in time. So I note that this service is a special one for the Feast of St. Matthew, which recounts the call of Jesus to the tax collector Matthew, who said, "Follow me." And the reality is that every disciple of Jesus must respond to this command each and every day. So how do we follow Jesus? I now have to make a disclaimer in terms of my religious following. I'm Rātana, I was baptised Rātana. So the marae that I come from, Pākehā in Waitahanui, we are followers of the Rātana Hāhi. Ihoa o ngā mano, te mātua tama wairua tapu, me ngā ana herapono, me te māngai hei tautoko mai, ai nei, ake nei, ai. So how do we make distinctions between those who seem to be truly on the path of righteousness? Everyone knew Matthew was a tax collector and therefore a sinner. So how would you like to be identified primarily as the sinner or a sinner? But if you are on the path of righteousness, then is it your behaviour, our behaviour, that defines who we are? Are your actions, our actions, morally justifiable or right? So reflecting on St. Matthew's calling from the pursuit of dishonest financial gain to the heights of holiness and divine inspiration, Pope Benedict said in 2016 that, and I quote, "In the figure of Matthew, the Gospels present to us a true and proper paradox. Those who seem to be the furthest from holiness can even become a model of the acceptance of God's mercy and offer a glimpse of its marvellous effects in their own lives." So I was asked to give a sermon about the main challenges facing Aotearoa at the moment and how we as a faith community might engage with these issues. I want to acknowledge that historically St. Matthew's as a faith community have engaged in those issues related to the philosophy, and I call it the practice of social justice. St. Matthew's were at the forefront of the anti-apartheid movement. St. Matthew's believed in an anti-nuclear peace movement. St. Matthew's were also at the forefront of homosexual law reform, and also, as was noted earlier, the same-sex marriage debate and discussion within Aotearoa New Zealand. And I note that you have achieved blessings of marriage, and there's still more to be done. So the Uniting Church this week became the first church to fully embrace same-sex marriages, so I want to acknowledge that. And I also would like to acknowledge the support for your neighbour, the Auckland City Mission. So since 1985, Auckland's big issues have been about homelessness and teacher shortages. And so there have been some interesting discussions lately. So on the 9th of July 1985, the Herald reported on how a growing number of Aucklanders were finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. In 1985, there were 70 people sleeping rough in the city. So over the last 3 decades, the number has increased to more than 23,000 homeless in Auckland. And I'm not sure if many of you participated in Monday's homelessness count, but very shortly we will have the evidence about the size and magnitude of the homelessness issue across Tāmaki Makaurau. In 1985, services such as the Auckland City Mission were present back then and continue to provide for those in need, providing food, healthcare, shelter, social services. In February 1995, Auckland also faced a teacher shortage as the roles of Auckland schools increased and the costs of living were high. The paper reported that fewer teachers were applying for jobs and there was a shortage of relieving teachers. Can I say, having visited all of my schools, that this is the issue that confronts us today? So it seems to me that history is repeating itself yet again. So today's issues that a faith community might engage with, based on the issues that I am faced with in my electorate of Manurewa in South Auckland, and they're in no particular order, but they are about homelessness and poverty. So how do we support, how do we advocate for those most vulnerable? For me, it has been about working with agencies like Link People, and Link People in my community are part of the Housing First initiative. And so what we have been trying to do is to befriend the homeless, because there's a misconception that people who are homeless actually like being homeless and living on the street. Can I say that they don't? But it's very difficult for vulnerable people, people who have been ignored, people who don't have family, or people who come from communities that don't have the capacity to help them, to actually ask for help and to say, I do want a home. I need some help and support. So I've been working with many NGOs and community groups and individuals that feed our homeless, that clothe our homeless, that take our homeless to our Manurewa Rec Centre 3 times a week so that they can be bathed and maintain a level of hygiene. And we've also engaged with some of our local medical practitioners who provide primary health free. And we don't do it, we don't advertise it, because we're not doing it because we want people to know we're doing it. We're actually doing it to maintain the integrity and the dignity of people who are living in circumstances and sometimes beyond their control. We also engage in what is now called pātaka, or community cupboards. And I'm sure many of you have seen right across Auckland communities who have set up these cupboards where people can donate food. No questions asked, no one has to register, but providing support to the community who are providing for those less able is another activity that I've been involved with. Immigration is a big issue for me. So people who have come to New Zealand for opportunities, some of them are migrants, refugees, many of them have family back in the heritage countries that they come from. So immigration is a big issue for me in terms of family resettlements, and also people who have come to New Zealand on visas, studying, or come to visas working. They want to stay here. They love New Zealand just as we do. So we have many people who are trying to settle here, and it's becoming harder and harder for people to do so. I believe that gender equality is an issue for us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I do want to acknowledge that we've just celebrated 125 years of suffrage, where, can I say, women fought for the right to vote. It wasn't given to us. It was something that was a 30-year process. And in 1891, 1892, in 1893, many petitions were presented to Parliament, and women like Kate Shepherd, like Merete Tai Mangakahia, fought hard for our voice to be heard. When I look at gender equality in my electorate, what does that mean for me? For me, it means issues such as pay equity. And pay equity is an issue because, as I learnt in the suffrage debate that I participated in Parliament, women were not considered people. That's why we couldn't vote. We weren't a person. So the change in the legislation actually highlighted that women were people, Therefore, we were citizens, therefore we could vote. But the other thing that we did was change the definition of who could stand for office, and we said explicitly that women could not. So next year, on the 29th of October, it will be our 100-year celebration of the right for women to stand for political office. So we may be the first country in the world that enabled women to vote, but it took 26 years for women to be able to stand, and then 40 years from the time we were able to vote for a woman to actually get into Parliament, and that was Elizabeth McCombs in 1933. Homosexual law reform in the Pacific and support for our LGBTIQ youth and our high rates of youth suicide continue to be major challenges. So we still have 7 countries in the Pacific that if you're LGBTIQ, you are a criminal, and that is women and men. I have had young people who have come to me to support petitions. A young woman of Samoan ancestry who started a petition to decriminalise homosexuality in Samoa. I stand in solidarity with that young woman. I've had LGBTIQ youth from some of our heritage countries, from India, from Pakistan, from China. Some of our Muslim religious young people who are LGBTIQ are being kicked out of their homes. No support. They want me to help set up a refuge, a house for young people. And the issue about youth suicide, I find incredibly depressing. How can our young people be so hopeless? Some as young as 10 years of age, that they'd rather, I can understand why they'd rather go to the next life, but not when you haven't fulfilled your potential in this one. And I think that that is a big issue for us as a country to grapple with, because what that means is that our young people are growing up in situations where they're facing abuse, where they're not being valued, loved and nurtured. And I think collectively we have to do something about it. And the other big kaupapa that I've been engaged with is about countries such as West Papua and the fact that post-World War II, post-colonisation, when the Dutch left, we actually left the West Papuans at the hand of the Indonesians. And so I'm part of a group in Parliament calling for a free vote for self-determination. And I think Indigenous rights and post-colonisation continue to be a big challenge for us globally. So I know that today is a special day and there is a focus on the city mission as the mission is moving into their temporary building on Union Street. And so today for the people of St Matthews in the city, you will have to farewell your neighbour. And I look forward to joining you to have a final karakia and then have a kai as we wish them well in the work that they do. And what I want to acknowledge is that what will replace what's currently there is 80 secure apartments and a 30-bed detox centre. Because I think many of us realise that some of our homeless, some of us that need the support of our communities actually do so because they have mental health, drug and alcohol issues. So for a facility to not only provide secure accommodation, that housing first model, but also actually help people who have a medical condition, first and foremost, is incredibly important. Right. My final word, and I am going to sing you a waiata today, and I think all of you will know the waiata, but this is my final word. Are we all on a path of righteousness? Is our individual and collective behaviour as members of our families, our communities, morally justifiable or right? Is that behaviour about responsibility? Is that behaviour about priority? Are we serving the needs of the people as they present their needs? If not the needs of those in need, then whose needs are we serving? Is this use of resources, individually and collectively, morally justifiable or right? So the waiata that I'd like us all to sing, and I did a little bit of research, but it's actually Amazing Grace. And I'm sure many of you will know Amazing Grace. But I thought this was an appropriate way to conclude my contribution this morning. And before I sing that, can I again say to you, Helen, and your congregation, thank you so very much for asking me to be part of this very special day. I feel incredibly humbled and blessed, and I just want to thank you all for the wonderful work that you do. So, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. What